Hi everyone, it's Tim and Kat here. So this is a slightly odd video in that, well, firstly you've got both of us together, which is unusual. Yeah, we're going to talk about our air conditioning heat pump system that we're using for heating at the moment. And we thought, well, I've done a couple of videos already. If you want to see those, check the link that's probably above Kat's head around about now. Yeah, that's it. And well, this is our sort of final follow-up video in that series. Basically, it's us having a chat about how we've felt living with the system. Yeah. Kat has opinions, which I'm sure...
I do.
And I've got opinions, and so we'd like to share those with you today. So I've got a series of notes that we've prepared together just so that we know what we're going to be talking about. And I'm going to be asking some questions. Kat's going to be asking some questions. We're going to try not to ramble too much, but this might be a long one, just to warn you.
It's going to be a long one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get yourself a hot drink.
Yeah, we both got our... Well, I've got tea, Kat's got coffee, and we're good to go. So let's get started, shall we?
Yeah.
So, well, shall I start asking you?
And I've got my cross stitch. Yeah. So that's what I'll be doing while we're chatting.
Yeah, Kat does cross stitch pattern designs, by the way, for those who don't know. She's got her own YouTube channel. I'll link to that in the description if you're interested in that sort of thing. But
I don't have as many subscribers as he does.
No, but that's the way it goes. So yeah, I guess the first question is, well, my question to Kat is, how have you felt about the heat pump system so far? We've had it for maybe nearly 2.5 months, something like that. Yeah. It was September, I think we had it installed. So yeah, how have you felt about it generally in terms of living with it, controlling it, and whether you felt comfortable in comparison to the gas central heating that we had last year?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is it's been really nice. I think I haven't fiddled with it a huge amount. I think you've done most of the actual fiddling with it. Yeah. But
you control it when you need to, right?
Yeah.
Because we both have the app on our phone, and so the app can. I think you can have up to 5 devices with the same account, which means anyone with that account can control the system as a whole. So I showed Kat how to operate it, and how have you found using the app?
Yeah, I mean the app is really easy. It's very easy to use, really intuitive, and it's we were going to talk about the app, weren't we? So I guess let's say
that's
at this
one of the
point
points here. We might as well talk about that now.
You found it really buggy.
Well, it's not buggy as such. Well, quite often when I want to change the temperature or turn one of the units on or off, it sometimes comes up with a message, failed to send command. And the only solution is to close the app, force close the app, start it up again, and then try again. And that usually is sufficient to fix it. But that will happen at least 50% of the time. So the app is not the most stable, but it does work, and you are able to schedule timings and everything else and all of the other settings, the temperatures and the fan settings and all that stuff is actually really, really easy to do through the app. We actually have remote controls. I can't be bothered to go and get one. There's one up there on the wall, but we don't really
we haven't used them.
We just don't use them. They're attached to the wall just in case, but almost exclusively we use the app. So
I was going to say I haven't really used it enough to have it crash on me or anything like that, but I did use it for a few days you were away, and actually that was fine. I don't think it crashed on me at all.
Maybe it's my phone, I don't know.
Maybe
I should try reinstalling it.
Yeah.
Well, we're both on Android, by the way. I don't know if that makes a difference. If you have an Apple device, there's the equivalent for that as well. But yeah, I don't know if it's just my phone, but yeah, it works perfectly well. I don't mind having to kill the app and start it again if I need to change a setting. But generally speaking, we've set them up on a timer so that they come on at, what have we got it set for? 6 o'clock in the morning. They basically all come on, including the one in our bedroom, which we'll talk about in a minute, actually. Then they just do their own thing during the day. Although I will add a caveat to that, in that when it's mild-ish outside, so sort of 10 degrees and above, 10 to 12 degrees and above, sometimes the 1 or 2 of the indoor units will probably get to the point where they don't need to be on. So I've got actually energy monitoring through a couple of smart plugs that I've got the outdoor units plugged into, so that I can just keep an eye on what the power consumption is like. And every now and again, I'll see it drop completely to zero on one of the units. Usually, it's the one that operates the hub and our bedroom. So it's the outside unit that's connected to 2 indoor units rather than the one that's connected to the other 3 units. And you'll just see it dropping off to zero, and then a few minutes later it will come back up, and then it will drop off again. So it seems to sort of cycle. Now, the reason I think it's doing that is because the outdoor units have got a sort of minimum level at which they can operate at. So if it's too mild for them to operate, at that level, they'll just start power cycling instead, rather than just sort of staying at a steady rate. So at that point, usually what I do is I just turn both of those units off for a couple of hours, and then once the temperature's dropped a little bit, I'll put them back on again. But otherwise, today it's about 6 or 7 degrees outside, and we've more or less just left them sort of ticking over in the background. So we don't fiddle with them loads. I fiddle with them more than you do, but
yeah, and I think that's actually a really, really good point. Is that right at the start we were fiddling with it a lot, and it would be nice and warm, and then it'd be cold, and I get really cold a lot of the time, so certainly colder than Tim. And so trying to get that level right for both of us, that I'm not in like 5 jumpers, can be tricky. And I think at the start we were fiddling so much, and I wasn't always 100% comfortable. Once we worked out we could it was much better to have them on pretty much more all of the time at a lower level, and just keeping it ticking over rather than going on and off. It was great. It's really comfortable, and it's at least as comfortable, if not more, than with the central heating. Yeah,
so what we used to do with the central heating, it would come on for a couple of hours in the morning, and then typically I would be working from home, Kat would be out to work, and I would just boost it when I needed it. Just hit the button in the airing cupboard to boost it for an hour. So I would go through cycles of being cold and then warm and then cold and then warm. With this system, we just leave it on kind of a steady temperature. If I need to notch it up a degree or two, I can easily do that through the app, and I can do it for the individual rooms. So if I'm in the office, right above where we're sat now, then I can notch that up to 19 or 20. But normally what we'd do is we'd set the baseline at sort of 18 degrees for the smaller rooms, like here in the lounge and in our bedroom and in the office. And then the open areas like the hub and the hall, if you watch the tour video that I did a few weeks ago, then you'll see the arrangement of the different indoor units. Those more open areas we tend to set at sort of 17 degrees. And I've got thermometers in the rooms now just to see what the temperature sort of equilibrates at. And it's typically leveling out at about 17.5 in the hall and in the hub area, in the kitchen hub area. And that's fine for most of the time when we're just passing through or making dinner in the evenings or whatever. That's fine, and we don't need it much warmer than that. In the evenings when we come into the lounge and sit here to watch the TV or whatever, sometimes I'll notch it up to 19 or 20, so we're nice and cozy. But for most of the time during the day, we'll leave it on at 18. I think I've got it set to 18, and the temperature I can see is 18.8, so that's okay. In an hour or so I might notch it back up a degree or so, so that we can settle in for the evening. But that's usually what we end up doing. And then we have it turn off at about 8:30. Actually, the bedroom we leave on until 9:45, but everything else turns off at 8:30, and that seems to be okay.
Yeah, and I would say then, very comfortable. I guess for preference, I would still like the hub area at the back to be 18 rather than 17 and a half-ish, but it would take, it's more expensive to heat that. So that's just kind of where we've leveled out at what's reasonable between being really super, super comfortable and spending a whole load more money. So everyone's going to find that different.
And that room is very big, actually. And I can't remember if I showed on the tour video. We have some very large bifold doors in the hub area. It covers half that wall. They're ridiculous. And we haven't yet got curtains for that because it's such a big span. We don't really know what to do with it.
We weren't sure if we would need them or not. And actually, this winter has proved that yes, if we'd had curtains,
that might have helped
really
a little
helpful.
bit. I think that would have helped us keep that room a little bit more comfortable. and actually useful for the summer because we get the evening sun in there, and in the summer that room gets really warm. So yeah, having a way of both keeping the heat in the winter and keeping the heat of the summer more under control. I think what we're probably going to do is get onto organising some curtains for that room, and that might help us, notch that up to 18 without costing us any more money. But I think that's sort of the one thing that you'd probably change is just that.
But I'm okay with it. It's absolutely fine.
Because we don't spend like loads of time in there, and actually we do socialise when people come round. That's where we tend to spend the time, and what we'll do is we'll notch it up at that point so that all the guests are comfortable and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we covered the first couple of bits, I think. Just to sort of reiterate, when we first got the system, Kat mentioned we'd fiddled with it a bit. We were sort of turning it off and on a lot more manually. So if we weren't in the room, we'd turn it off. And then when we went back into the room, we turned it on. And we've stopped doing that because it was a massive pain.
It's a complete nuisance.
It's a huge nuisance, and it was cold. Honestly, it was not comfortable. So we've stopped doing that, and it has increased the overall energy use a little bit. I will be doing a full breakdown of all of the energy statistics, the usage, and the total power output in a future video. So that will involve spreadsheets and everything else. I am still gathering the data, but I have got a nice scatter plot of temperature versus energy used. So I'm sure some of you, a certain portion of my audience, will enjoy that video.
It's actually quite interesting.
Yeah, so my day job is, well, I'm a programmer, but I also use spreadsheets quite a bit. So this is my bread and butter. So bear with me. I will be going through all of the gory details, and maybe you'll find that useful.
If I think it's interesting, then it's a good start at least.
Yep. Okay. Well, while we're on the subject of energy and power, although I will be doing that full gory details breakdown in a future video, I will give you a few sort of highlight statistics now, because that is something that people have been asking in the chat, actually, in the previous videos. What that's the one thing that more often than any other question is what's the energy use like? So we have 2 outdoor units, and they're rated at 7.5 kilowatts of cooling power, and I think it's about 9 kilowatts of heating power per unit. So this is a pretty big 4-bedroom detached house, and I did a heat loss calculation, which I'll show at some point in the future maybe, and at -3 degrees I think we lose just over 7 kilowatts in this house. So having 2 outdoor units each rated at 8 or 9 kilowatts of heating output is more than adequate. We're massively overspec'd, I've got to admit. We probably could have done a better job sizing the system, but it does mean that when it's a sort of typical winter's day, between 5 degrees and 10 degrees here in the UK, they can basically just run on a low setting, just ticking over, and that is more than adequate to keep the house reasonably warm. So typically what happens at 6 o'clock in the morning when they come on, they'll both outdoor units will start at around about 1 kilowatt each, something like that, but very quickly they'll drop off down to somewhere in the region of 500 or 600 watts, and they'll stay at that more or less for the rest of the day. So depending on whether or not they start power cycling or not, and I'll have to turn one of the units off, it will result in the overall energy use in the day being somewhere between 10 and 20 kilowatt hours. So on a day like today, I think I mentioned it's about 6 or 7 degrees outside. I'm expecting something in the region of 15 or 16 kilowatt hours. Yesterday we only used 12, and it was about 8 or 9 degrees outside. So roughly every degree that it gets colder, we use about 1.8 kilowatt hours more, at the point where we would use 0 kilowatt hours at 17 degrees. I don't think actually we'd have the heating on until it got below about 15 degrees outside. So again, I'll be showing all of my calculations in a future video. But when it got really cold for those couple of weeks in December, when it got down to sort of -4 or -5 outside for the whole day, the most we were using was about 35 kilowatt hours. So that gives you a sort of ballpark figure for the sort of energy use we've been experiencing. We did also do one experiment when we switched off the heat pump system and used gas instead, just to see. And that day it was about roughly 0 degrees outside, and we used more than 80 kilowatt hours, 80, I think it was 82 kilowatt hours of gas. Some of that was for hot water, so probably about 75 kilowatt hours of that would have been for the heating. Yeah. So for the equivalent, using our new heat pump system, it would have been about 25 to 30 maybe. So we are using about a third as much energy with this system compared to what we would have been using for gas. It's very hard to do a precise comparison because the balance of the temperatures was probably slightly different in the different rooms. So
and you don't use the systems. We tried to use the gas central heating the same as we would have done with the heat pumps, having it on more constantly, just to try and balance it out so that we were using
to get
roughly,
a better comparison.
Yeah, to get a better comparison.
What I'd like to do is another comparison when it's a bit milder, so sort of somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees, something like that, and do the same experiment. But yeah, from the ballpark calculations, it's about three times as more efficient than the gas.
And you're expecting that might actually be a little bit better than that when it's warmer.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why we want to do a milder day.
Yeah, so that was a particularly cold day when we did that experiment, and the coefficient of performance of heat pumps becomes a little bit worse when it's colder. For those of you who are familiar with heat pump systems, when it's milder, you'd get a better performance, which means you'd use correspondingly less electricity in comparison to the amount of gas that you would use. So that's what I'm expecting. It's very hard to do it, as I say, very hard to do a good comparison. But the idea of doing that was just to make sure that we were in the right ballpark rather than being really super precise with it. And it did feel like it was about in the right ballpark. So that was good. So yeah, I think that covers the power draw and the energy use. So each outdoor unit should max out at about 2.2 kilowatts according to the data sheet. We've never seen them anywhere close to that. When it's mild and we can actually turn off one of the units, and the other one of the outdoor units anyway, the outdoor unit that runs the three smaller rooms, so the hall, the lounge, and the office, that will just tick over at like 300 or 400 watts, and that uses very little overall energy during the day. So that's very handy when it's just me in the house working in the day, and Cat doesn't have to feel cold, so that'd be good. So right, what else? The other thing I've got on here is the defrost cycle, actually, which was very interesting, actually.
It was so interesting that Tim sent me a video of it doing its defrost cycle while I was in work.
It was fun.
Because he thought I'd like to see it.
Because I mentioned this in one of the previous videos, but I was in the office and the fan the fan of the indoor unit just stopped completely. I was like, well, what's he doing that for? It's still chilly in the room. It was it hadn't reached its full temperature yet. So why has it stopped? And it occurred to me it must be doing its defrost cycle. So I rushed outside with my phone and took that video, which I showed at the end of that first of this series of videos. And yeah, it was really interesting. It was fascinating, and it only lasted about 5 to 10 minutes. So anyone who's worried about the defrost cycle affecting the comfort of the rooms, don't worry about it. It only takes 10 minutes to run through the defrost cycle, during which time basically all the indoor units just stop, so you don't get like a blast of cold air or anything. I put my hand up and I couldn't feel cold air dropping out of the fan or anything like that. So you don't feel it get cold. You just notice that the fans have stopped, and then 10 minutes later it will start up again, and it carries on warming. So it doesn't really affect it too much. And actually, when it was super cold during those couple of weeks in December, it would do the defrost cycle maybe every 3 or 4 hours. So I was surprised actually at how infrequently it was doing it. And as soon as it gets above freezing, it doesn't run the defrost cycle. So we haven't had it on. It hasn't been doing it since it was really cold those few weeks ago. So yeah, that's nothing to worry about if you're concerned about about it all icing up in the winter. It deals with it automatically. You don't even need to worry about it, and it doesn't particularly affect the comfort level in the house. So that's cool. So the next point on my list is the aesthetics. So this is probably one you're more qualified to talk about. So, I mean, I don't really mind either way. But did you want to talk about how you found the styling of the units and how it compares to radiators and things like that?
Yeah, the aesthetics was something I wouldn't say worried about, but definitely something that I was thinking about, because I'm not used to big boxes on the wall, and I thought, oh, it's going to be this potentially ugly big white boxes on the wall, and they're so not that. I've actually been really impressed with them. They look really nice. I think having the fabric covers that you can put on, and you can even go and get different colours for them if you want. Yeah, they actually look really nice. Everyone who's come in just says, oh, they look really nice. Oh, they look like big speakers. So, yeah, I quite like them. So definitely shouldn't have been worried about that at all.
Yeah, so we investigated a few options with our installer. There was a bit of back and forth, and some of the ones he was suggesting, I was showing them to Kat, and she was like, well, you know, I could take them or leave them. And then he suggested these ones, and Kat immediately said, yes, those are the ones.
Actually, yeah, I'd forgotten that I genuinely I wasn't so fussed by some of the other ones, and then you showed me this one, and I thought they actually look quite nice.
I was a bit surprised, actually, because they are quite different to what you'd normally see. And maybe that was the point. Maybe that's why you found them more attractive.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, I think they look all right.
I really like them. And you mentioned the radiators, and I had not really considered the fact that we can get rid of the radiators. And I actually got quite excited about that, because I get some wall space back again, so it gives more flexibility for the room. So yeah, that's actually going to be really nice.
So I think what we were planning on doing was basically getting through this first winter, seeing if we could get through the entire winter just using the aircon units instead of the central heating, and if we felt that was sufficient and comfortable enough, at that point we would consider getting rid of the radiators, because we just don't need them anymore. I don't think it's going to be as cold as it was, earlier in December for much of the year. Like, you might get 2 or 3 weeks of that sort of level of cold in the UK, and they cope just fine. We were fine. Did you feel it was okay?
Absolutely. I would have no concerns getting rid of the radiators at this point.
Yeah.
I feel like we've proved that for anyone who thinks that maybe heat pumps don't work in winter, absolutely fine, really comfortable. I would definitely get rid of the radiators.
And actually, there's another point, that we've obviously got the ones up on the wall, but you can get these sorts of units, but almost like a radiator style. You can have them, lower down, and that works really well for heating, because they work almost exactly like a radiator, except that they're blowing the hot air, up from the from these floor standing wall units. Whereas with the ones up on the wall that we've got, obviously they're designed to be cooling units, so that's why they're up high, so that the cold air can sort of flow out across the room and then down. But if you want them in heating mode, what we do is we basically leave the louvre vents pointing as vertically downwards as possible, so that the warm air is blown down to the floor, and then it will just sort of spread out and then gradually sort of permeate up. So we never feel a draft against us, because all of the air is directed, straight down to the floor. So it's never coming out into the room. And I think that's probably the best way to do it.
I think it would feel weird if you could feel. I know some people have said they can feel the air blowing at them, and we don't have them set up to do that.
No.
So it feels absolutely fine. Or some people have said it feels drying or very. It's felt no different to me than central heating in any way. The only thing I would say is that it's a bit quicker to heat up the room, I think. Yeah,
it depends on how you want to do it. So usually we have the fan on the lowest setting just to keep it quiet, and so that it's not disturbing us or anyone else. And that's usually sufficient. A couple of times when it gets particularly cold, we might notch the fan up to level 2 just for a little bit, just to boost that energy output. And even then, we don't really feel a breeze from the fans. And yeah, one of the other questions I've had, a few people ask me, do you find that it's sort of quite a dry dry feeling heating system. And yeah, we've not felt that at all. I think if you have them actually blowing into the room and you feel that draft, I think that's when you can start to feel that they're drying. But if you can have them directing away from you, then that feels a lot more comfortable. So yeah, and in fact, we've got thermometers which have also got humidity sensors in them in the various rooms, and I can tell you that the humidity has not gone down with the units. It stayed about the same as it has before. So yeah, it doesn't actively dry the air when it's in heating mode. It only dries the air in the house when you're in cooling mode. So that will happen in the summer. But yeah, when it's in heating mode, it doesn't really dry the air. It might feel dry if you're sort of stood underneath them and you can feel the fan blowing on you. But yeah, we've not felt it, as a sort of drying sensation on us. I don't think.
Definitely not. No.
So yeah, so that's hopefully if you've got this sort of heat pump, air-to-air heat pump system for your heating, and you feel it drying you, maybe try redirecting the fans so that they're not directing at you. Maybe that would help. So yeah, the other point I've got on here is about radiant heat. So some people have mentioned, oh, have you missed that feeling of radiant heat that you get from a radiator? And I've got to admit, I've not really noticed that much of a difference. I guess you feel the radiant heat from a radiator when you're sort of walking past it, really.
And you do with these. You feel the heat when you walk underneath them.
Yeah, but it's not a radiant heat. It's actually the warm air.
No, but it's kind of fun. You walk underneath and you're like, oh, warm air.
Yeah, so we get that with our hall units because it's actually right above the door to the lounge here. So when you're walking in and out of the lounge, you do get that draft of warm air on you as you're walking through the door. But yeah, you don't get that feeling of a hot radiator, I guess. And maybe some people would miss that. I think the way that we're using this system now is having the rooms at a sort of more steady temperature. I think it means that the walls actually equilibrate to that temperature. So maybe we get a bit of that radiant heat from the walls now that we didn't used to do with the central heating, the gas powered central heating, because we'd have the radiators on and then they'd be off for a couple of hours and then they'd be on again. So maybe you get that sort of cycling of radiant heat, but you don't get it all the time. Whereas now maybe we get a sort of lower grade. Yeah,
I think maybe it depends on your setup and whether you're used to maybe sitting somewhere and your radiator's quite close to you, so you're used to having that heat source. I don't think we've ever sat. We're not like that close to the radiator to think, I missed this nice warm radiator.
We've got that one radiator here. That's the one that we used to use for the lounge. But that's actually quite a small radiator.
Yeah, I think it's maybe if you sit close to a radiator, maybe you'd notice missing it, but we don't. So I don't think we do.
Yeah, one person in the comments in the previous videos said that they've got an air-to-air heat pump system like we do, but they've added a couple of infrared panels to some of their rooms. To give that radiant heat, and maybe that's an option if that's the sort of heat you like. Then adding an infrared panel might be beneficial. I would argue that that heat pumps are that much more efficient in terms of turning electricity into heat that I wouldn't bother with an infrared panel, because they're only 100% efficient instead of 3 or even 400% efficient like with a heat pump. But if that's the sort of heat you like, knock yourself out. I'm not telling you how to heat your house. I've not found the radiant heat an issue. But if that's something that bothers you, then maybe consider other options or a sort of combined hybrid system perhaps.
Would that be any better if you had a wall unit?
Good question. I don't know, because they've still got a fan in them that
I don't know if you'd feel any more. You probably wouldn't.
I don't know how they work actually. It might be that they would heat the sort of front body of that floor standing unit perhaps and provide that same sort of heat. I don't know. It's a good question. If you know, write it in the comments, and hopefully people will see that if they're interested. There's different options. If that's the sort of if you prefer that sort of radiator setup, then you can still use a system like this. So yeah, it's all good. So yeah, the next point on my list here is noise levels. So this is something that we were talking about literally just the other day. Originally, and I think I mentioned it in a previous video, we weren't going to get one of the indoor units in the bedroom because we were worried about the noise being, waking us up in the middle of the night if we wanted to have the heating come on in, earlier in the morning to keep the warm, or get the room nice and warm for when we woke up. Would that be a problem for us? So we didn't do it initially. It was mild enough that we didn't need to have that bedroom unit come on. But actually, for the last few weeks, I guess, we've had it coming on at 6 o'clock in the morning, along with all the rest of the units. And occasionally, so what happens is the louvre vents close up when they're turned off, and when they turn on, there's a very sort of faint motor noise that when they open up, they sort of goes as they open up for a few seconds. And that occasionally wakes me up. I'm a lighter sleeper than Kat,
yeah.
So I have woken up from that a few times, but usually I go back to sleep after a few minutes. But the main thing we were worried about was actually the fan noise, and honestly,
no,
it's really not been a problem at all in the bedroom.
No.
Again, we have it come on at the lowest setting, so it is very, very quiet. I think the spec sheet said it was something like 19 or 20 decibels, which is pretty quiet. It's it's like somebody breathing, I guess. It's really faint. Cat breathes sometimes in the middle of the night, and that wakes me up more than the more than these units have done. But
and I haven't heard it, as Tim says. I
think you sleep more soundly than me.
More soundly, and I have very rarely heard it turning on at 6 o'clock in the morning. And if I have, I just barely register it and straight back to sleep. So
yeah, so we were very pleased actually to have got that, because we keep the bedroom unit on ticking over during the day, just so that the bedroom doesn't get really cold. We have that on at 18 degrees, and usually we'll just leave it on at 18 degrees because by the time we go up to bed, that room might be 18 and a half, something like that, and that's perfectly comfortable. We don't really want it any warmer than that, honestly. Some people prefer their bedrooms colder than that. So.
And in fact, I almost probably could tolerate that a little tiny bit cooler than that, because you kind of get warm overnight. So yeah, it's absolutely fine. Yeah. But I'm really glad that we actually did go for having one in the bedroom, because at the end of the day, we decided to do it because we don't actually have to have it on overnight if it was going to wake us up anyway. We could have just had it to warm during the day, so it would have been really silly not to put one in there in the first place.
Yeah. It was a very last minute addition, and I'm glad we went for it. It was obviously added to the cost, but I think the alternative would have been adding some sort of electric radiator in there, which is something we're going to have to do for the bedroom, for the bathrooms, the en-suites and such, because we need heated towel rails in those wet rooms, basically, which I spoke about before in the pros and cons video. That is something we're going to have to add, and that's fine. We'll do that in the spring probably, because at the moment we're still heating our hot water using gas, and that is heating the towel rail in our ensuite. So that's providing the drying for our towels. But yeah, we will need to replace that. So that's one of the downsides. But we'll get around to that at some point during the spring, probably the summer, because we're so lazy. But we'll get around to before the next winter. We'll definitely have that
before next winter.
The aim is to get rid of the gas before then. We simply won't be able to heat those towel rails otherwise. So. Mm-hmm.
And does that bring us on to actually talking about heating the other rooms? Yeah. We have two
spare bedrooms
that don't have any heat pump.
Yeah,
and we will think about what we're doing with those. But we had guests over Christmas using...
my mum and dad came around for Christmas.
Using the main spare bedroom. And they do like a cooler bedroom. So we knew we were probably okay. Just nice duvet, nice blanket. And we just gave them a little Dyson fan.
Yeah.
To say, look, we opened up the door.
Yeah. So during the day, the door was open so that the hall unit, which is sort of down on the ground floor, could fill the upstairs space as well. And any rooms which had the door open, that would, some of that warmth would go into the rooms.
And that actually got it to not a bad temperature.
I think it was 17-ish degrees.
Yeah, so I mean that's not some people would be completely happy with that anyway.
Yeah.
Pop the fan in there, and your dad said he put it on about 20 minutes in the evening.
Yeah.
When they went up to bed.
And then another half an hour in the morning.
Half an hour in the morning just to warm it up when they woke up.
Yeah.
So
you know, if that's what we have to do in the short term anyway, when people are staying over the winter, that's very little running cost just to have a fan heating system in there, and maybe we'll replace that with the radiator in there with an electric one, which we can set up with a timer. But for the moment, we're happy with just having that fan in there.
It works really well if it's cold. We've got guests.
Given how little we use that room over the winter, there was really no point putting an indoor unit in there, and it would have required a whole other external unit because it's on the opposite side of the house, which you'll see if you watch the first of this series of videos where I show the floor plan of the house and where the units are. So yeah, I think just that completing the heating system with a couple of additional either electric radiators or electric towel rails is something that we need to do.
But it's not urgent.
And we'll get around to that in the summer probably. So the last point on here that I've got, actually, well, penultimate point: are we happy to get rid of all the radiators now? And I think we more or less touched on that earlier.
Yep.
I think we are.
Yep.
We're confident that the system is sufficient for the purposes of heating our house. For the worst that the British winter can throw at us.
Yep. We had loads more capacity.
Yeah.
Even when it was that -4 or -5 outside, we had more capacity. We were fine inside, and we could have heated more if we needed to.
Yeah. We still had the fans, the indoor units on the lowest fan setting for most of the time.
Yeah. So I would radiators can go.
Yeah, and then again we'll get around to that in the summer, but. Then what are we going to do with all this wall space that we're going to free up?
I'm going to put a cross stitch on it. It's not really the right height for cross stitch.
No, actually, that's another benefit that I didn't mention in my pros and cons benefit is that we can now put cat's cross stitch patterns. We can get those framed and put them above where the radiators would have been.
Yeah, hanging a cross stitch above a source of heat, probably not a very good idea. Yeah. So now I have more wall space that I can hang cross stitch on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've now got these fan units on the walls, which we probably don't want to put the cross stitches on, on the wall below. Although the air that comes out of those units is less hot than the air that rises from a radiator. I measured the temperature of the air coming out of these units, and it was from a distance of about, I think it was 45 centimeters, a foot and a half, something like that. It was what was it? It was like 25 degrees, something like that. So it cool once it comes out of the bottom of the fan units, it dissipates very quickly, so you don't feel. I don't think it would affect your cross stitch patterns.
No, I feel like it would definitely be a lot less of an issue.
Whereas a radiator's typically 50 or 60 degrees, depending on how hot you've got your flow temperatures. Reduce your flow temperatures, by the way, if you do have a gas central heating. That will help improve the efficiency.
You have a video on that, right?
I do have a very popular video on that. Some of you may have seen that. I think probably the air rising off of a radiator is much hotter than the air coming out of the fan units for the heat pump system. So
I would think so.
Unless you get an air-to-water heat pump system, in which case you'll be probably running your radiators at 40 degrees, which would be, that would probably be fine. Actually, you could probably put cross-stitch patterns above those without any issues. But
it's quite a niche concern, really.
Yeah, maybe. I'm sure that it's a non-trivial number of people who would like to hang paintings or pictures of that might be temperature sensitive. So it's a factor.
That's true.
Should be added to the list of things to consider. I missed out. A point here about the installation process. So I actually took a couple of clips of the installation progress. I might splice them in to this video now. it wasn't horrendous. It took 5 days roughly in total. There was some. It was a little bit annoying.
It's pretty noisy.
It was quite noisy. Well, you would have seen from those clips, but anytime you get work done on your house, it's going to be annoying and probably a bit noisy. So that's just the way it is. It was, I guess, try not to get it done in the middle of winter because there's a lot of toing and froing in and out of the house. So you'll probably be in a cold house if you get it done in the winter. So my recommendation, we actually basically I just did a Google search for air conditioning installers locally, and we found a guy who was quite local and gave a reasonable quote. We're very lazy people, so I actually only got the one quote. I should have probably got another couple of quotes from different companies, but as I said, we're very lazy people. I knew roughly what I was expecting in terms of quotes, so because the quote was reasonable, I thought, well, he seemed like a nice guy, and he did a decent enough job. I'm sure other companies would have done as good a job, maybe better job, maybe worse job. It's a gamble you always take. The ducting is probably about as neat as it can be. I've had quite a few comments on our previous videos saying that the ducting looked quite neat. So, and other people saying, well, the ducting is a bit of an issue. Honestly, on the outside of the house, it just looks like guttering. Like it's very similar to the downpipes. So you probably wouldn't even really recognise that it was.
And it's down the side of the house.
Yeah, and
there's a bit at the front, isn't there?
There's a little bit at the front, but that runs underneath the windowsill, so you don't even in the spring. You're not even going to see that because the flower bed's going to grow up in front of that. There's a little bit in the corner of the room here. Go and check the other video if you want to see what that looks like. It's behind the door, so that doesn't really affect us that much. Most people wouldn't even notice it's there. There is a bit of ducting in the ensuite because that. Again, go and watch that previous video if you want to see why. But again, you only see that when you're in the ensuite. Nobody who's going to visit the house is going to see that. We only see it. It's only about that long in the room, so it's not that big a deal. No. And that's about it really. It all comes down to your internal arrangement of your house. That's plan it well, I guess, to try and minimise.
I mean, it's not going to look super pretty, and it's something to think about depending on where your units are on the inside and on the outside, and where any ducting might have to run inside your house. We're really lucky. It's kind of out the way. You're probably not going to get away without having some ducting, as long as you can put it somewhere that you don't mind.
Yep.
I think that's fine. If you really, really don't want to have any ducting, then it might not be for you. If you can't manage it without any ducting,
But likewise, if you had an air-to-water system, you're probably going to end up with some pipes, going in and out of your house somewhere anyway. So, it's.
I don't mind it, but I think if there had been a lot more ducting and it had been in much more visible places,
we would have thought twice.
Yeah, definitely.
But there you go. So that brings us on to the last points that I've got on my note here. What would we have done differently? Having lived with it now for a couple of months, have you got any points that you'd like to raise on that?
I don't think I do.
No. I think probably the one thing I would have done is maybe talk to a couple more installers. I mentioned in one of my previous videos, we just didn't bother even looking into air to water. Because I know, we've got microbore pipes everywhere. Getting underfloor heating would have been a massive pain in the arse. Replacing all these radiators would have been annoying, but it was probably replacing all of the piping, which would have been the most disruptive part of it. But honestly, I don't know if that would have been necessary. Probably should have got somebody in to have a look. But again, very lazy people, just couldn't be bothered. And we also, because I work from home, just having that cooling mode in the summer
I would still have gone for this.
I think we probably still would have gone with this system anyway. No, I don't think we would have done anything. One thing I might have done differently actually. I would have probably thought a little bit more carefully about whether we really needed 2 outdoor units. So the reason we've got 2 outdoor units is to supply enough power to power the 5 indoor units that we've got. So we have 2 2 outdoor units, each of which is capable of supporting 3 indoor units. But because the hub is such a large room, that required a very powerful indoor unit, which meant that we could only connect 2 indoor units to the outdoor unit, and that needed to be of a sufficient power to, which means that it had to be the particular outdoor unit that we got that could support 3 indoor units, but it's got so that it's got enough power to provide that extra large room. But they do systems which can provide enough sockets in the outdoor unit to supply 5 indoor units. So that might have actually been sufficient for our purposes, but it might have meant that we couldn't have put quite such a powerful unit in the hub, which might have meant that would have had to run at a higher fan rating to provide the same level of heating. But I don't know. So that's maybe if we'd done a bit more planning, we could have got away with that. But I don't know.
I think I would rather have a bit more than we need than a bit less as well. If it's going to come out either way, yes, maybe we have a little more than we need, but that's the better way.
It probably would have been slightly cheaper to have gone for a single outdoor unit with 5 sockets rather than the two outdoor units. But yeah, we might have found that that the heating level may not have been sufficient. So, but yeah.
And if you think we use that hub area for socialising, you don't want to have to be running it at a higher fan that's noisy when you're socialising.
Yeah.
So particularly for that area, it's good to be able to heat that with it on a low fan setting.
Yeah. So yeah, with that in mind, that might have been a slight tweak that we could have made, but otherwise I'm pretty happy with the system. Seems to be working well. I like the fact that we can control it from our phones. It means that when we're away, we can actually, we can maybe dial it down a bit while we're away, set it at a slightly lower temperature, but have it just, come on before we get home, notch up the temperature before we get home so that it's comfortable. That would be super useful for if we ever went away for a long period of time. We went to visit Kat's family. It was just for 24 hours, but it was nice to be able to make sure that the house was warm when we got back, as opposed to it being freezing cold. So that's a really nice feature. A couple of the quotes actually we got from our installer were for units that didn't have Wi-Fi built in. Now I would recommend getting units with Wi-Fi because being able to control it from your phone actually has been really, really handy. So you may not find that that's as useful to you, but I've certainly found it very beneficial. Just being able to set up schedules is just much easier, using an app rather than having to fiddle with a remote control, which is not as intuitive. The remotes are fine, but I think setting up a schedule on using those.
I don't think I've touched one.
No, I've used them maybe once or twice just to turn the units on and off if the if I've not had my phone on me at the time. But yeah, usually it's unnecessary. So yeah, we've probably covered everything. We've talked for probably longer than we should have done.
Probably too long.
Hopefully, what I might do is if there's particular subjects that people are interested in, I might do like a trimmed down version of this video with those particular subjects, sort of cut into shorter videos, and then I'll add those to the channel. Alternatively, I'll be adding chapter markers in the description below. So if there's any particular subject you're more interested in than others, use the time codes on those to jump straight to the
that
chapter.
Doesn't help if they've got to this point in the video and they've just watched all the way through.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that at the beginning, maybe. I'm not gonna worry about that. If you know how to operate YouTube, you'll know what I'm talking about, and hopefully you'll find that. But if anyone would find it useful for future reference, if you want to see particular clips from this video that are maybe a little bit more bite-sized, then let me know, and I'll make those available on the channel as well. But I think we're all done, aren't we? Have you got anything else that you'd like to add?
No. I think it's been really, really good.
Yeah, it's been overall pretty positive.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm extremely happy with it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't go back to using gas. I don't think. And yeah, I think that's probably all that we've got to say. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. I hope it's not been too tedious for you, and that you've got something useful out of our little ramble. I will be back back with more videos with all of the statistics and the numbers in the next video. I've also got some other interesting news that I might share with you later. Maybe
don't share it now.
I'm not going to share it now. No.
Quite enough.
Yeah, that's enough from us, I think. So yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
Bye.
Bye for now.